Ladies and gentlemen, due to a multiplicity of things, including our guests' incredibly busy schedule, the fact that we're in between all sorts of holidays in Europe et al., I will say, as you watch this, it's 6 o'clock in London, it's 1 p.m. in New York, 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. But actually, we're not live this evening. Sorry about that. However, greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Patrick L. Young. The IPO-VID Livestream, Series 19, Episode 5. In the aggregate, that makes us at 113. Starts here. And good grief, well, it feels like it was almost an unlucky 13th renewal. It was only the third renewal, I think, in this series of disaster. But nonetheless, the Multi-Commodity Exchange of India have, through their own complete management incompetence, been sublimely fleeced by 63 Moons, formerly Financial Technologies Group of India. They, the MCX that is, are going to be paying no less than $30.5 million for 6 months of service on the software they've been trying to get rid of for years, because TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, have once again missed their self-appointed deadline for installing a new system. Better news from India. The Singapore Exchange, the National Stock Exchange of India, and Gift City were all celebrating. The Nifty came home for international trade. The index itself roared through 19,000 to all-time highs as the NSE Gift City overseas focused exchange opened for business in partnership with SGX. Good luck to all concerned. Meanwhile, over in Israel, the Israeli finance minister called banks scandalous, which was remarkably enough viewed as controversial. It sounds to me like a perfectly decent description of banks most of the time. In the UK, that controversy reigns as banks are apparently now policing people's personal opinions and then opting whether to suspend their bank accounts according to the mood of the bank on that particular day. The most influential British politician of the past 30 years, Nigel Farage, has decided to speak up for Britain's new cadre of unbanked. And finally, this week, the irony of it all, ladies and gentlemen, the Australian Blockchain Week was sponsored by who else? ASX. Yes, that's the Australian Securities Exchange Group, the people who couldn't organise a DLT in their own CHESS replacement, despite spending $250 million directly on the project and much, much more beside in ancillary expense. Then again, one does just wonder, what was the Australian Blockchain Association thinking when it branded alongside the world's most conspicuous blockchain failure as their sponsor? On to happier news, our guest today is Scott Shellady. We're going to be chewing the market cud with the cow guy. Scott is an experienced managing director with a demonstrated history of working in the capital markets industry. He's best known as the cow guy, a financial TV regular for decades, often in his remarkable trading jacket. Scott is markets anchor of RFD TV in Nashville, Tennessee, where he's host of the Cow Guy Close Show. Scott Shellady, welcome to the show. Greetings. Where in the world are you today?
I am in Nashville, and a good day to everybody else out there, wherever you may be.
Thank you very much. Our first guest of 112 different episodic guests who comes from actually the state of Tennessee, let alone the wonderful city of Nashville. So, Scott, tell me, how did you first get involved in financial markets?
Well, in 1962, my father was hired by Cargill. So anybody that knows commodities probably knows a little something about Cargill. And my father started there in 1962. That was Des Moines, Iowa. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, as was my brother. He was then subsequently transferred to the home office up in Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota, where I spent the next 3 or 4 years of my young life. And then finally, we were then transferred down to the Chicago Board of Trade, where he ran Cargill Investor Services for them from about 1971 to 1976 when he went on his own. And so from there on out, my father was a trader on the floor of the exchange in Chicago. And once I finally graduated from my schooling, I didn't think I was going to be any good at it, but I kind of wanted to get it off the list. And here I sit.
Wow, quite incredible. So where did you go to work in the first instance?
Well, I went out to the University of Colorado to play football, from Chicago to Boulder, Colorado, where Mork and Mindy hail from. And then when I graduated there with a finance degree, I came back to Chicago, and that was right after the crash of '87. It was the spring of '88 when I got out of school. and you could have wallpapered my bedroom with all the rejection letters that I got while trying to get a job in finance right after the crash of '87. But I finally was picked up by somebody that would offer me the chance to. They would teach me to trade at the same time and pay me while I'm being taught. So I thought that was a pretty good deal, even though it was only $7,000 per annum. But I took it, and I did well enough. That was 1988. I did well enough in 1989 for them by they taught me well. I traded well, and they sent me to London as a 24-year-old to start their European operation. And so I was made a partner in the firm at that age, and went to London. And I don't know, I want to say the rest is history, but their steps really just began. I went over for a firm called Prime International Trading. I was the international in that name. From Prime International, I then went to Deutsche Bank, which is probably fairly well known. And from Deutsche Bank, I went to Mizuho. From Mizuho, I went to a technology firm in the space called Pat Systems. And then from Pat Systems, I came back to work with my father while he was about to retire here in Chicago, or up in Chicago. We got to spend some time with each other in the pits for 1 year, shoulder to shoulder, which was probably the best year of my life because I had the most fun and working with your father. And then I did our family business by myself until about, 2015, where I went back to London for another 5-year stint. And then it came all the way back home to Chicago after that, and around just late 2019, and got a job doing full-time media for RFD TV here in Nashville, and that's behind me on the wall. RFD TV is they're really the only commodities news program. I would say it's a lot like Fox for Farmers, but we've got probably 65 million. We're in 65 million homes. We're on the Dish Network. We're probably on all the cable providers except for Xfinity. And so it's a fairly big deal, coast to coast. And I've got a live show, my own show, from 1 to 1:30 Central, 2 o'clock Eastern. And I do that by myself, but I'm an anchor for the financial news program from 10:30 to 1 Central Time, 11:30 to 2 Eastern. So it's busy. We also have a radio offering. It's rural radio on Sirius XM channel 147. Got to get that in there. So I do a radio show at about 7:30 every morning here Central Time, 8:30 Eastern. But so it's pretty busy. And I do things like this when I'm not doing all that stuff. So there you go.
Well, we're absolutely blessed to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. I know it was impossible to do live because that runs so close up against your own live show. The last half hour before you go live on any day is usually a bit frantic as you're making sure everything goes. I love that moniker that you apply. Great epithet, Fox for Farmers. It's easy for people to understand what you're doing. So going back in your career, I mean, you've seen an incredible amount of change in these markets over this time. I mean, I'm actually sympathize with you because I was interviewed for my first job, which I was offered on a day called Monday, October the 19th, 1987, which was actually, I think actually I was very lucky because that was the cutoff. After that, I don't think anybody got offered a job for about another 6 to 8 months. And they offered me the job that day and I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And the next day I went to another interview and they said, has anybody offered you a job? And I said, yeah, they've offered me a job. And they said, take it. So that was how I got into this incredible business from London. What was it like going to London when did you go to London? In the late 80s, early 90s, first of all?
1990, just early 1990. Like I said, I was 24 years old. I had never been abroad. I had to get my first passport to do it. It was a big deal. And this, obviously 24 years old, you fly from Chicago to London. We didn't have cell phones when I got off at Heathrow. I had instructions to make my way to South Kensington, where I was going to be in a bed and breakfast. And we were starting our operation from Chicago up in London. So obviously there had been arrangements made for me to meet some people to get our business up and running. I was the sole proprietor of the firm I was representing. And so then, obviously there was help there with people to try to help sort me out a place to live and show me the ropes per se. But I tell you, from never having really been to overseas to going from Chicago to London for the first time, And again, with no cell phones, no way. Now I had to call my folks from, a payphone. I had to get, I don't know, 10-pound coins that weighed down my right pocket, almost put a hole in my trousers, just to be able to do that. So it was a pretty big shock, but at the same time, I embraced it. I loved it. It's always what I wanted to do. I love traveling, and so that was 1990, and now in the year 2023, I'm a full-fledged British citizen. I go back a lot, and probably more than half of my friends reside there too. So it was probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, incredible. If nothing else, you make me laugh, because I think exactly around this time, I remember various of my friends and colleagues from Chicago were always complaining when they came to the UK, because, that change is just so heavy, man.
Yeah, well,
I mean, compared to the American quarter, I mean, the pound coin is certainly, I mean, it's an object you could wage war with given a reasonable catapult.
Yeah, well, there was a joke. There was always the pound coin was designed by a tailor. So
yeah,
exactly.
Definitely. It was absolutely designed. Same way that those ketchup sachets were designed by somebody with a big dry cleaning franchise, I think. It's one of those things. Yeah.
It seemed that every time you went through a turnstile in London, if you had any change in your pocket, it would tear your trousers.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It caused actually the best thing ever was, gosh, we're getting off topic here, but it's quite funny. The Tokyo Grain Exchange, when it was independent, used to always give away those little change pouchettes, and they were the greatest thing ever. I still have, like, literally, I think at IDX in about 1992, I hoovered up about 25 of them, and I'm still using them, because when you're in the UK, it's the only way to keep your trousers intact. But
I had now that you bring up the TGE, the Tokyo Grain Exchange, it's probably a little known fact, but when I was with Pat Systems, I flew over with the CEO at the time. His name was Jacques Tecoq, and Jacques and I arranged to buy their matching engine, because at the time they had a very, very good electronic matching engine. So I spent a lot of time in Tokyo buying the Tokyo Grain Exchange's matching engine so that we, at the firm I was at the time, we could sell or license it to you, so you could run your own exchange. Basically, we give you that. It was a pretty cool thing. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the Tokyo Grain Exchange, because I spent so much time over there in their building. It was a lot of fun too. And having worked for Mizuho in London, that was an easy transition. And if I've been in the business for 36 years, 16 of it was in London, 20 of it was in the U.S. But a large part of the time I spent in London, I spent in Asia, because of I was a managing director of, it was back then called the Industrial Bank of Japan. Now it's Mizuho. But I probably spent, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks out of every quarter in Asia for probably 2 or 3 years. So I spent a lot of time over there. Had a lot of fun. I still have a lot of friends in Tokyo. But it was, it's just, the business has taken me around the world. I can't complain. Every day. I'll die tomorrow, and it's been a good run.
Well, certainly, I mean, the other thing you've been very fortunate in was you were in lots of places when they were super dynamic and developing. I mean, the futures business between the late 80s all the way through to the late 90s, so much was happening, so many new markets, new products coming on stream. It kept you wildly excited, even before the floors started having a kerfuffle and going electronic. And then to move into the vendor business with Pats, that was a very exciting time, because the whole move electronic was really upending the entirety of the financial market system for trading, particularly futures and options.
Which is probably to a large degree why I'm sitting where I'm at right now, because you're right. But that was always my attitude, is I could see the writing on the wall. We had a very large electronic presence in London that they did not have in Chicago. So I had a little bit of a leg up on my friends in Chicago, because I could see what was going to be happening to the market there, no matter how much they wanted to resist. So the transition in London helped me transition in Chicago, but all the while I knew in the back of my head something else needed to be done, which meant I needed to find some other way to survive in the business. And as I got older, I love trading, and I've traded my entire life proprietarily, but I've also been a broker. It was getting more and more difficult to be a broker with electronic trade, because a lot of the customers were starting to do their stuff by themselves, and rightfully so. I have no problem with that. Or you go to a prop shop and try to proprietarily trade, and that's fine too. They give you a percentage of your profits. But at the same time, that's pretty stressful, and I'm getting older. I'm 57 years old now. And so I thought, somewhere in the early 2000s, while I was back in Chicago, I started to feather my nest with more and more media. Now, I had done some in London when I was there I was in London for 12 years, 1990 to 2002. And I came back to the States for a little while, and then I went back in 2015 for another 5 years. So it's been 16 years in London, basically. But while I was there, the first time I started to dabble in a little bit of media in the 90s. I liked it, but it was never really anything that was being, taking off. Now, just after 2000, you saw a ton of money flood into commodities. I'd always been I started in the corn pit. That's where my father traded in 1988. But when I went to London, it was all fixed income. And so I did, short sterling, bunds, lira. So I had really more of a financial background when I finally came back to London Chicago the first time in 2002. And when I went back down to the floor, my father retired. He wore that black and white jacket that I'm so well known for now. And when he retired, I threw it on. But at the same time, all the money that was flowing into our commodity sector had already been in the fixed income and had already been in equities, but commodities really became de rigueur. We had a lot of people starting to trade oil and the likes. All of a sudden the cameras showed up because the money was there, and they wanted to talk to the guy wearing the stupid cow jacket. So by hook or by crook, and I accidentally backed into a career. I didn't really mean for it to be a full-time thing, but boy, oh boy, around 2005, 2006, I could start to tell that maybe this could be something. And away we went. So I was able to hone my craft in Chicago doing it that way. And then when I went back to London, it was even better the second time around. Obviously, by then in 2015, the markets were all electronic. But I got hooked up with a couple of people in the industry, and they really, really helped me build my brand and made it go, not quite viral, but definitely global. So by the time I came back here just before the pandemic, things were kind of lining up to give me the opportunity, if something came up, to do media full time. And so it came up here at RFD TV. I had done some spots for them in the past, but they needed a full-time markets anchor. And then I knew that if I could get my foot in the door here, I'd get my own show. And that's what happened. So here I sit.
Fantastic. What an incredible story altogether. And tell me, how do you compare and contrast? I mean, the trading day, say with the floor, compared to your executive days, for example, at Pat Systems, compared to what it's like now to be a full-time TV anchor?
Well, I tell you, that's a great question. And so when you're trading, it takes a while to train yourself to know that some days you're going to come home from work with less money than you went. A lot of people, my brother never went into the business because he just didn't really want to embrace that idea that you could go to work, put a full day in, and come back with less money. Most people think that you should come back with more money, right? And so, but I loved the idea of not having. I thought suicide to me would have been putting me on the floor with a bunch of bankers for my first day, and then looking down the row and seeing somebody that had been there for, say, 20 years and knowing exactly what I'll be doing and making in 20 years' time. I couldn't stand that. I always needed to have the opportunity to do much better. If I could just hone my craft and do well. It was much more like sport, and I love that. Right, you get the chance to be up to bat every day, and you're only as good as the last time you're up to bat. But after a while, that income is very, very volatile. And so then I slowly but surely moved into doing more and more, being more of a broker, which my father always was. He was really never a proprietary trader. And he would always tell me, it's better to have that nice, steady brokerage income as you get older, so you don't vibrate to death because of the stress of trying to trade proprietarily. And he's not wrong there. And that was still fun. But then when the floor started to go away, I feathered my nest a little bit, and I saw an opportunity in the this online trading thing, or at least bringing platforms to the ex-traders or people that wanted to get into the business. I felt as though the futures business was like a stadium, and I was at the forefront of those stadiums, breaking down their walls and offering the seat to anybody in the world, which is what we were doing. So instead of having a trading floor where only a few people could get in, we were selling software to allow everybody to have a seat in that stadium, and I love that idea. And so that was fun because it was such a dynamic, new, booming business, especially around the internet, the high tech boom, and things were just, it was the go-go days of the early 2000s with technology. However, our offering went from being high tech startup to suddenly being repriced as a utility, which it probably should have always been a utility, but it got swept up in the high tech atmosphere for a while. And so the multiples were much, much, much larger as a high tech offering than it was as a utility. And so when trading screens then went from being this high tech offering to a utility, you probably saw on about one, your stock went to a tenth of the price that it used to be. And so then that was not as palatable anymore. So, and I went back into trading a little bit and started to hone my craft in media.
Well, speaking of the nexus between the digital world, media, and everything else that's going on in the world of electronic trading, it's great you're here this week, Scott, because as you may know, we've got a book of the week that we're producing at the moment, and we recommend something for everybody's library. I have to say, my staff created the recommendation for the next book of the week, so-called because it took place on the 1st of July, 1999, a rather epic event, and hopefully that we'll be able to see this, which was actually this little tome, Capital Market Revolution. And now Capital Market Revolution tells us two tales. First of all, it was written by somebody called Patrick L. Young, whoever he may be. And second of all, actually, I had a co-author. My co-author was a guy called Thomas Tays, and Tom Tays was a floor trader for many years, and someone who Scott's going to know incredibly well because he was the co-founder of Pat Systems. So it's just quite incredible how incestuous the book, man, the book world, the financial world, everything managed to get over time. So Capital Market Revolution was devoted to the future of finance in an online world, and it was launched at the British Library on July the 1st, 1999. So it's 24 years ago, quarter century coming up next year. What will we do to celebrate, ladies and gentlemen? Suggestions on a DM, please. Of course, those picking up the book these days might think, wow, gosh, wasn't this all absolutely obvious? But I can tell you at the time it was a truly radical expose on how markets were likely to look in the future, even if subsequently we had ended up managing to see markets going electronic, exchanges going for profit. The prospect of ETFs becoming a hugely dominant factor in the managed investment scenario, as well as actually the prospect of electronic money. Although, of course, that became known as cryptocurrency. And I have to say, I didn't talk about the blockchain, so therefore I'm one of the few middle-aged men out there who doesn't claim to be Satoshi Nakamoto. At the same time, Capital Market Revolution is, well, I think it's still a rather gripping read, but of course, you don't want to get to the old stuff, you can always try the latest book, Victory or Death, which was published just during the pandemic, which is all about, well, the same sort of stuff, blockchain, cryptocurrency, the future of finance et al. That's our book of the week for now. And don't forget, if you want all the news on the Bourse business, then sent daily to your inbox, subscribe to Exchange Invest via exchangeinvest.com. It's only $349 per annum to join the exchange of information. So back to the cow guy, Scott Shellady. So Scott, funny how the world all comes together. The strange nexus of how once you've been on a couple of floors, you seem to feel as if you know somebody everywhere on the planet, or so it seems to me.
Yeah, you're right. For two different reasons. Number one, I was on the floors of Chicago and New York and London, and then obviously the Matif in Paris, the Tokyo Grain Exchange. I've been to a lot of floors around the world. So yeah, you end up having cohorts and understand what it's like to be a floor trader. Wear a funny colored jacket, and scream all day for a living. But at the same time, being in the media and doing a lot of media all around the world as well. You get recognized for that too, and it's great. And I'm never ever upset when people stop me in the street or interrupt a dinner at a restaurant, whether it may be in Thailand or New York or Australia. It's been a lot of fun. So you get to know. I mean, I worry sometimes that my memory goes on me because you get to know so many people when they come up and say hello to you. You absolutely recognize the face, but you can't place the continent or the exchange. That's the problem sometimes. So it's been a great ride. I mean, I'm still enjoying it. It's still going, and we've got a lot more to do because like you mentioned in your book, I'm sure is this capital markets revolution. We're going through another revolution now. Back then, it was the internet, right, and how that was going to change our business, and the internet was the wild, wild west. Well, that was probably the last time the U.S. had a balanced budget and a balanced, their books were balanced. Now we're running a $32 trillion deficit. It might be the case again that we see that taken care of by this new revolution called artificial intelligence. So we're on the cusp of something exciting again. I plan to be around for it, and it's going to be to talk to all of our viewership and everybody in business. But I'm going to brace it just like we did the last one and see what happens.
Well, of course, the fun thing about being in the media, Scott, is that hopefully you don't have to worry too much about career expiration. I mean, there are a lot of people who can manage to do media for a long, long time to come. Whereas you mentioned already the fact that the stress of trading can certainly be an issue the longer you do it. How do you feel about the actual position of financial media, and particularly television financial media, given the fact you're doing it every day?
Well, that's another great question, Patrick. Ultimately, it's all about eyeballs, which means ultimately it's all about entertainment. And you have to be able to be, you have to know your craft. Obviously, people are going to not listen to you if you don't know what you're talking about. But then you also have to make it entertaining. And so there's a lot of people out there that I'm sure are a lot smarter than I am, but they're not wearing a black and white cow coat on television, right? So there is a little bit of a brand that needs to go with it, as well as know what you're talking about. And so with that, you're exactly right. It allows me staying time as long as I'm on top of it and continually bringing new things and honing my craft with new viewers and bringing in younger viewers. That's what you're always after in this media business now, is a new demographic. You don't want to have all your viewers, your customers, I call them, die and get old and fade away. So you constantly are looking for things to keep people entertained, because it's all about entertaining. I just got back from a tailor last night because, look, I've been in Nashville, Tennessee for 2 years now. So I'm trying to put together a little bit of a Nashville flair with the cow jacket flair. So I've got some new jackets for television that are, got some rhinestones on them, just like the Wild West and that, or not the Wild West, but the country music scene and in Nashville. So I'm trying to meld those two things together to constantly reinvent yourself and keep going. And it's a lot of fun. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but I was an art major at university. But I also played a pretty high level of American football. But I got both of my hands crushed almost at the same time within 3 or 4 weeks of each other. So I couldn't draw anymore. And so I had to go a different route. And by then I'd been on the football team long enough that the academic counselor for the football team got me into the finance school, which I normally wouldn't have been, I couldn't get into out of college because my grades weren't good enough. And so then I went into finance because I couldn't draw anymore. So I do have this left-right side of the brain issue that a lot of folks don't have, which has been to a large degree my success in media, because I definitely don't look at the finance world like most people in a blue suit, white shirt, red tie do.
That's a really interesting point, because you think about it, and certainly, I mean, a lot of people have this view from the outside because they've watched all those movies, the Wall Streets and this, that, and the other, and they see this incredibly glamorous world. But actually, apart from the lovely blue suits, probably without the rhinestones if you're on Wall Street, of course, the actual day-to-day can be incredibly humdrum. And I think that's something that people really don't understand, that so much of finance is really just a day-to-day process with a T+, probably T+2 nowadays, settlement frame and all things around you. And essentially the pattern of life is ongoing. And if it's the first Friday in the month, it's the unemployment report, and that's going to dominate your day. It is interesting if you can think outside the box. And certainly the points you make about media, I think, are very key. You've got to make your point quickly. You've got to be entertaining. And you've also got to break things down for people, which I think is something you do terrifically well, Scott. And you do it across a multiplicity of commodities, interest rates, and other markets, which is obviously got to be tricky, because I'm sure there are viewers of RFD TV. There are some of them who are completely 150,000% focused on soybeans, and they're not even that concerned about wheat by comparison.
Absolutely the case. And so when I came to RFD TV and I had that idea, what my idea was is that, in America, especially after the pandemic, what folks don't realize is because of the price of land, and we've all seen what inflation's done to land prices, and the prices of some of the products and the commodities that these folks grow and raise every day, every year, they're probably the wealthiest, the largest, most wealthiest group of investors in America that has been so ignored. They're so underserved.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, you know, I know a lot of farmers because we have a family farm, so I can talk a little bit. And I know that they don't just trade corn, soybeans, and wheat, even if they're a soybean trader, soybean farmer, or a wheat farmer, or a corn farmer. A lot of them do a couple or all three. But I know that they make a lot of money, and they have a lot of money, and they trade a lot of stuff. The S&P 500, treasury bonds, currencies, crypto, they're everywhere. Okay. And so I said to the owner of the station, you don't realize it, but these people are very involved in the markets, and I don't want to do a show and teach them how to farm and talk about farming, even though it's a largely agricultural channel. I said I want to have a show to teach them what to do with the money that they make by being farmers or ranchers. And they bid it, and they like it, and it worked. So now we're the #1 live show on the network, and sometimes once or twice a week we're the #1 show on the network. You know, we even beat prime time. So it's really been fantastic, and it's been a lot of fun because I get to teach, you know, a whole viewership about the markets that really want to learn about the markets and have the money. But they're too busy. They're out there trying to make grow the beef and corn that they feed America with. So it's been a great marriage. It's been fantastic, and I love it. And so I just want to make sure that I can do this till if I'm 57 now. I wouldn't mind doing it till I'm 70. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, as long as you can bring the energy, it's a really good fun altogether. And I totally agree with you. Doing media can be a fantastic thing. I have a wondrous sideline actually with not cows, but cars, because I commentate on race cars. And it's always great fun to go and do that for a couple of weekends a year, because you just get such an opportunity. Because thinking about farming, it brings me back to my favorite Paul Gallico alliteration, which was, you know, when he'd written great novels, he was a very, very successful guy financially. He was still reporting from the bleachers for the New York Post or one of the New York tabloids on the baseball games of a Saturday evening. And people were saying, why are you sitting there? Why are you writing about this? You could be at home. You don't have to get ketchup squeezed all over you from people's hot dogs and so on. And he said, yes, but all human life is there. And I think that's so true. It's so true of the pits that we've seen in our careers. And it's so true of the agricultural community, because people think of, yeah, they're just people who kind of wake up, plant stuff, shuffle stuff around in fields or whatever. But when you look at the technology they now have from that international technology company, John Deere, when you look at the extent of their land holdings, the cash that they're producing, etc., you're absolutely right. That's an incredible demographic that you're dealing with.
And they're so ignored by Wall Street because Wall Street just doesn't get it. So it's been so much fun because these people have a thirst for the things that I've lived in my lived experiences. And you know, we just did a special on obviously everybody's still has the pandemic is still front and center in their minds. But just think, you know, when we had everybody shut down and nobody could go out anywhere and all the restaurants were closed, and I mean, the cows still needed to be milked. You still had to go put the corn in the ground. You couldn't roll up in a ball, vibrating, worrying about getting sick with a pacifier in your mouth. These people had to. Their idea was, you know, what their lived experiences with COVID was. It was just another Tuesday. You know, so it's been such a different environment and different experience that it's been a breath of fresh air. And I do a ton of speaking. I go out a lot, probably twice a month. And it's so nice to get in front of people that, number one, still adhere to common sense and come in from out of the rain. Nobody tries to, you know, convince them it's not raining. But at the same time, also, they kept the country going, and because they couldn't go away and not go to work anymore.
You remind me that we've got a fantastic show coming up in a few months' time, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be happening in the fall or the winter. We're going to have Rod Gravel at Blondin, and he was the man who was the head of marketing for the SAFEX, the South African Commodity Exchange. And his is actually a tale of farmers coming in from the rain when he drove all over the countryside to effectively meet the whole farming community of South Africa and explain to them what these futures markets were going to do to them when the government gave up on grain and barley and wheat subsidies. And it's going to be a great show that coming up. It's so interesting what you talk about. And also, Scott, I was bemused because I was thinking about the fact that all the way through the 70s, 80s, 90s, even to this day, we had all of those introducing brokers who would think of nothing of getting out there in their Winnebago with a satellite and going around all the farms, making sure everybody got hedged, everything was sorted, and they would just move from area to area depending on what was being harvested in that particular week or month. Maybe what Wall Street has to do is get itself a gilded Goldman Sachs Winnebago and get out there in order to manage to deal with these wealthy private clients throughout the absolute heartlands of American agriculture.
Yeah, again, you're right. They're very wealthy. They're underserved. They know the markets because they have to hedge their business anyway, and so they're absolutely involved with gold and treasuries and the likes. And so they're also largely in the quote unquote flyover states, so they get missed out a lot on stuff. But it's and to be brutally honest, there's probably not a massive amount of them because there's not a ton of farmers because you need a lot of land. But I tell you, it's just been so heartwarming for me to be back in the stead with normal people that really, they when they shake your hand, it's a done deal, and they have common sense, and they know when somebody's trying to pull one over on them for sure. And to your point about explaining things and breaking things down, I mean, I don't know about you, but I remember as a young man asking for directions back before we had Google Maps, and somebody would give me directions, and I think, man, that was kind of confusing. And I finally get to my destination, and I thought to myself, why couldn't he just said go 2 miles down the road, take a right at the Red Barn? But for some reason, that was a long and a drawn out process. And I thought maybe I can make money or make a living breaking things down and saying it like I want to hear it to everybody else. And maybe they like to hear it like I want to hear it, not like how these highfalutin people, it was to your point about being in technology. When I was with Pat Systems, I had success in that world because I asked a ton of questions, but everybody there wanted to talk in acronyms like, we're going to, everybody in technology, they also like to have it as a barrier to entry, right? So let's talk about technology, but only use three letters all the time. Like what's your whatever, your dial, your landline or whatever they were saying at the time. And I would say, what does that mean? What are you talking about when you talk about, Wi-Fi or, a landline? I mean, and then once I got the lingo and I understood it, I could easily go in and talk to anybody else about it, but I would never use their language.
Yeah, and breaking things down is so important. And actually, I would say the two industries that are worst at that are finance and technology. And when you get to financial technology, that seems to be a multiple of the first two. They've got about 70 times leverage of total complexity. And
Right.
I think the way to describe it is, I think you're beautifully tickling the API-G spot there, because there is all of this garbage people want to talk about. And you would remember well, the vast majority of early adopters of something like Pat Systems business were people who were floor traders. And therefore, if you went out to them and talked about their WILAN and this, that, and the other, they just looked at you blankly. Whereas what you got to do is hit that button and then hit that button. Now, what you got on the screen is trying to represent what's happening in the pit. Suddenly you could have a conversation. And it's so important. And finance, I think, is appalling. That's why we do this show, ladies and gentlemen, amongst other things, to try and bring a little more wholesale finance into your life and try and spread some understanding, because it's really, really annoying. The degree of complexity that finance and technology loves to put over. So I'm a huge fan of what you've been doing for RFD TV, because I think you really break things up beautifully, Scott. And let's give you a slight rest there. And we're going to go to, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. Yes, the dogs are barking with excitement. We've still got one puppy FOB if anybody wants to take delivery, by the way. 10 years of Exchange Invest, the newsletter of the exchange industry, the water cooler of the bourse business, the exchange of information, if you like. We've had a series of messages sent to us over the course of recent weeks. One person who was wildly busy in the course of our first tranche was Will Mitting. I'm delighted to say we've now received some very kind greetings from Will Mitting, and here they are. Over to you, Will Mitting.
Hi, Patrick. Many congratulations on the 10th anniversary of Exchange Invest. And what a 10 years it's been. By my calculations, you've written over 4 million words in the past 10 years, providing the daily insights you do, which is the equivalent of 4 Bibles, and a lot more entertaining as well, I might say. Keep up the great work. I certainly look forward to reading your newsletter each day, and I know many others do across the market. Here's to the next 10 years.
Thank you very much, Will Meeting of Acuity. What a great message. Acuity doing great work, by the way. Aggregating opinions, understandings, and looking at the future of what's going on within the business. Their reports are really, really becoming a must-read for executives throughout the business of exchanges, particularly the futures, options, derivatives business, as well as they look towards what's happening through their expert network. Thank you, Will. I hadn't thought about the idea that I've written 4 Bibles at this point in time. I really don't think that they'll probably be as well remembered in a couple of 100 years. I think the Bible has got that momentum and distribution that we can't possibly compete with in our tiny little niche industry. But it's interesting to think, 400,000 words a year. That's about right. So here I am with the cow guy. We're chewing the market cud with the cow guy, Scott Shellady. He's coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee today. He's got another wildly frantic day of excitement going on. He's going to have his live show in a couple of hours' time. So tell me, Scott, what's it like in the rundown towards presenting your show every lunchtime?
Well, I tell you what, I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I mean, it was a wish and it came true. But I have a producer. So if you can imagine, in American football, you've got a head coach, and they've got basically maybe they have a headset that goes to the quarterback's helmet, right? And so I'm the quarterback. I'm the one out in front of everybody in the stadium. But there's a head coach that's a lot of times calling all the plays, and I've got a producer. Her name's Ashley, and she's I've just been the luckiest person in the world to find somebody that good. But we sit down here in about an hour and a bit, and we will go through the news of the day, because everything's got to be fresh. I can't do anything that's old. And a lot of times the national networks will copy what we put on our show, because we come out at 2:00 Eastern, and the national networks come out at 6 or 7 Eastern, and they'll see what we put out there. And it's a nice thing to be copied by them, because a lot of the things we come up with, we can do it first. But we sit down and we think about, it's only a half-hour show. We have 3 blocks. We have an A, B, and a C block, 3 guests, 3 subjects. So we try to come up with 3 interesting subjects that we know that our viewership is going to want to know about. And it could be politics, it can be technology, and it can be the markets. It could be anything that we think that pertains to them learning about finance, or how the world goes, or how politics can affect finance, or what's been happening with the World Economic Forum and how that's going to affect something that may be in their lives. But we put all that together with 3 great guests, and our guests are on Fox, CNBC, CNN. So I've got a lot of good friends in the world that they do me a favor and come on my show as well. And so, that we kick that off at 2:00 Eastern, 1:00 Central. And it probably takes 5 hours to put on a half-hour show, which a lot of people don't know, but there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, because I have to put it in a teleprompter. We have to have everything has to be edited, and we have to have cut and splice. When I'm talking, there's a big board behind me showing pictures, and I mean, you just don't realize I'm sure you do, Patrick, but I mean, a lot of folks don't realize that even just a half-hour show can take between, say, 4 and 5 hours to put on.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's easily, you're looking at a factor of 6, 7, 8, if not 10, in order to put together any sort of show. And the more you get intensive with graphics and additional input, the more difficult it is. And also the time that your producer, your showrunner, your booker are taking in order to manage to get those guests, make sure that they're on time and so on. And thank you, Ray. You do such a great job of booking and organizing all our guests for this show. It really is a very, very time-consuming business. And how does it feel then when you've got through that half hour at the end of the show? Is it instantly time for more coffee, or do you get a bit of an adrenaline buzz as you feel the wrap?
Oh, no, there's an exhilaration of getting through the end of it. But then, I still have, that's pretty much it for me at RFD TV. But I do a lot of other speaking or other podcasts or other guests on different shows, sometimes like this. And so that will probably... Monday through Thursday. I try not to do it on a Friday, but I'll have something to do after my show. But yeah, it's exhilarating to sit there at 2:30 Eastern time and my show is, I can tell if it's going to, if it was a good show or a bad show. Sometimes you have technological glitches or something's irritating or a guest doesn't show up. Sometimes that happens, where I have to freeform it for a total of 8 minutes on live TV, coast to coast. That's a little bit stressful. So when you finally come down from that at the end of the show, I probably have about a 10 or 15 minute break where then I have to go do something else, usually like a podcast or a conference call or the likes. And then I'm finally done about, 3 o'clock Central Time, 4 o'clock Eastern. And then I finally can think about relaxing and going home.
Well, it's one of the great things, actually, that I love about being in the USA. When you're in London, it seems to me to always be a longer and more stressful day, because when you get up, the world's already trading. And when you think about going into your evening, the world's still trading, and they're still trading till 9:30, 10 o'clock in the evening, something like that, depending on whether you're in the main part of Europe or you're in the UK. Whereas America, there is this beautiful thing that when those bells start ringing on Wall Street in the middle of the afternoon and things go off, I know there's still electronic trading, but we do seem to have a remarkable lull. There's like this void of calm, isn't there?
Yes, you're exactly right. And, that was one of the things that, London was great and bad for, because, I ran the Industrial Bank of Japan, or Mizuho, right? I was the managing director there. So we had a bunch of staff. But, when we got out of bed in the morning, we were an Asian bank. Well, Asia was already, in the middle of their day. So we covered Asia trading and then the Asian close. We had obviously a European Open and a European all-day close, and then we covered the U.S. Open. It was a long day. That's a 12-hour day for sure. And you're exactly right. It seems a little bit more stressful because somebody somewhere was always doing something. But here, when you finally get to the States and you do finally see you hear those bells ring in the afternoon, it does give you a different sense, than the end of day in London did, because we would leave, the square mile at 6:30 in the evening. There was always a 1 or 2 pints next to the tube stop. Hop on the tube, get home. It's 8:30, but it's still, the New York Stock Exchange is still open, right?
Yep.
So you really never got away from it, but you can do that in America, and that's one thing that I do enjoy.
Yes, it's a lovely break, knowing that you've reached the end of the trading day, and basically it's going to be about the time you go to bed before anybody else decides to wake up in the morning and start the next day, which is always very helpful altogether. So, Scott, I mean, looking back on your 36 years in markets that you're talking about here, what do you think is the most interesting element to what's happening in the world right now?
I love technology. I think for health reasons, technology is going to be a great thing. I think for money movements, I think technology is going to be a great thing. And I think seeing what the internet has done to how we live our lives and what we have, the power of what we have on our hand every day with these phones that we keep in front of our faces. I'm excited. I know there's a lot of trepidation about artificial intelligence, and I think there should be. But I also think that there's going to be some great things that come of it, and we're going back to 1998. If you ask me, it just feels like we don't know what we don't know, and we're going to be kind of fumbling around in a dark closet looking for the light switch for a while here. But I think it's got some tremendous capabilities to, if it's done right, we can harness it. Now there are some very damaging things that can come from it, just like there was some very damaging things that could come from the internet, and we've all had to live through those as we've tamed or kind of tamed. We still have problems, right? I mean, you can still shut down the Eastern Seaboard's power grid right now on the internet. I mean, let alone artificial intelligence. So there's still always going to be these dangers, but I think that it could be a tremendous opportunity, and that's something that I think the financial world, Patrick's been looking for. What is this next thing going to be that can maybe right our ways here, because we are $32 trillion in debt. The last time we weren't in debt was when the internet revolution happened, and there was such a boom in business. So it remains to be seen, but the reason why I like technology is because I do have a creative side, and there's so many creative things that you can do with it that I'm really excited to see what might be coming around the corner. I do appreciate that there are a lot of dangers, but at the same time, there could be some fantastic strides forward.
So that, I think, probably frames us precisely. I mean, you're a big technology guy. It's interesting to hear about your arts major background. I didn't appreciate that before, Scott, which must have been quite an interesting thing, being majoring in fine arts at the same time as doing American football. Those are not two things that I necessarily instantly equate as being equivalent. And I'm glad to say that such things do take place. But looking therefore towards, you know, the future more specifically in our markets, and I suppose drawing back on our book of Scott Shellady, where do you think the capital market revolution goes next?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that we're moving down this path where I think people think that we're going to have sentient learning. I don't know about that yet. But I do know that, you know, let me go back to day one, right? I speak in front of a lot of folks, and they ask me the same question that you just asked me. And I say, here's the deal. You can either embrace the change or resist the change. And because, you know, if you go back to what's the world's oldest profession is often thought of as prostitution. Not that that's anything that I indulge in. However, in Amsterdam and in Las Vegas, we have a couple of brothels that only employ artificial intelligent robots. Now, that's not my gig, and a lot of people, that's not their gig too. However, it's put out of work normal humans. And so I say all the time, Patrick, if artificial intelligence and technology can put out of work the world's oldest profession, then we all have something to worry about. And so then your next question would be, well, am I going to embrace this change or am I going to resist this change? And I can't tell you, Patrick, how many times I've landed in both New York and in London and gotten in an Uber or gotten in a cab, and it was somebody from the trading floor that really hasn't found his way or her way yet. And even all these years later, and it was mainly due to the fact that they resisted the change, stayed on the floor too long, and by the time the floor finally shuts its doors, there wasn't anything out there for them. And I think that that's another great example of, if all of us can be replaced, and if we try to embrace that change, we'll have a chance of moving forward with that change. And I think that, you know, as I said before, it's artificial intelligence is going to be a big deal. It's already kind of being a big deal. You want to get on board it. You don't want to resist it, and see where it takes you, and keep an open mind. Always really embrace the fact that there are going to be some bad things. That's going to be with anything. But I think that the next capital markets revolution, we don't know what we don't know. I mean, who knows if we can beam ourselves up like we did in Star Trek? I mean, who knows what's around the corner? I could never have imagined the power that my cell phone has in my pocket today 20 years ago. Never. So who knows what's going to happen in the next 20 years. But I can tell you what, you can make it fun instead of make it be bad.
You can make it fun instead of making it be bad. That's a great maxim to live by. I totally agree with you. The whole issue of the flexibility of people on the floor who didn't move fast enough, and they ended up actually becoming their own worst nightmare. I remember well the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Jimmy Olaf, we had on a few weeks ago. He invited me to their electronic trading center to try and help teach traders to move electronically right around the time of the capital market revolution. It was a great program. Only CME did it uniquely amongst all the world's futures and options exchanges, and it was a joy to be part of. But I remember trying to get these guys' attention was incredibly difficult. And actually what I did was I got their attention by holding up the previous day's Chicago Sun-Times or something, which I'd picked up in a jet-lagged state on the Sunday. And it was talking about, what do people really make in Chicago? And I said, so, $50,000 a year. And the whole room just went, puff, 20 years ago, $50,000 a year? Yeah, whatever, nothing, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, well, look at how many people are making this. And guys, I don't mean to be rude, but right now, you are all qualified to be dog walkers, which are right down here in the fourth quartile of what people are making. And that was the moment when we had a breakthrough, because a lot of people actually emailed me privately that day. And the headline was, I don't want to be a dog walker. We need to talk. I want to be an electronic trader. I want to understand how to do something better. So the transition is everything. And Scott Shellady, I applaud you. You've made incredible transitions through your 36-year career, not just across continents, into media, across all sorts of different things. You are an epitome of the fabulously interesting American dream, if I may say so. I mean, you know, you've managed to travel across America, you've traveled across the world, you've done great things. We love your show at RFD TV. Long may it continue. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much, Scott Shellady, for a fantastic show today. I also want to thank our production team, Fernando, Marianne, and Natalie, for your great work. Coming next week, we've got a brilliant financial futurist, an old friend of mine. He wrote, wow, books about the city when I was still in short trousers, actually. Hamish McRae. We're going to be joined by his delightful Scots, Burr and Brogue next week. He's going to be talking about all sorts of matters in relation to the future. Join us 18th of July, same time, same place on Facebook, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and indeed LinkedIn. And that will, of course, be 1 o'clock Eastern or 6 p.m. London. My name is Patrick L. Young. Final thank you to Scott Shellady, the cowed guy. It has been a joy to chew the cud with you this evening. And ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all the absolute best wherever you may be, whatever you are currently involved in, whether it's an agricultural pursuit or not. I wish you a great week in life and